He walked in covered in dust, denim jacket clinging to his frame like a working man fresh off a long day, boots scuffed, shirt stained, and a quiet fire in his eyes. The showroom sparkled under bright lights, cars polished to perfection, salespeople laughing behind sleek glass counters, but not one of them looked at him. Not a nod, not a greeting, just a glance exchanged between two staffers, followed by a smirk. To them, he was nobody, someone lost, probably in the wrong place. But the man they mocked wasn't just another customer walking in off the street. He owned the building they were standing in. Every car, every chair, every light bulb. He didn't come to buy a vehicle. He came to see who he could still trust. Tell us where you're watching from. And if you've ever seen truth walk in unannounced, this story will stop you in your tracks. Darius Cole wasn't the type of CEO who announced his presence with designer suits or loud speeches. At 44, he had built his life from the ground up, starting in the back corner of a greasy auto shop with a rusted toolbox and a gift for solving problems no manual could teach. Years later, he owned one of the fastest-growing dealership networks in the region. But success hadn't dulled his instincts. It had sharpened them. So, when complaints about one particular branch began to surface, stories of racial bias, shady fees, and disrespect toward working-class customers, he didn't send a memo. He drove there himself, quietly, alone, and unannounced. No assistant. No driver. Just Darius, his dust-streaked shirt from helping a stranded driver that morning, and a denim jacket older than the building's marble floors. The dealership gleamed under showroom lights. Cars sparkled like trophies on display, and the air smelled like new leather and rehearsed charm. Salespeople floated across the space in crisp polo shirts and well-rehearsed smiles, at least when they wanted to be seen. Darius stepped inside, but no one greeted him. Not right away. He watched as a couple entered behind him and were welcomed within seconds. Meanwhile, he stood beneath the same roof he owned, unnoticed. Then came Kelly and Tyler, young, sharp-voiced, and just arrogant enough to think they knew everything worth knowing about people. They leaned near the coffee machine, arms crossed, eyes darting toward Darius as he browsed quietly through the rows of vehicles. Kelly rolled her eyes. Tyler gave a low chuckle. They didn't say it out loud, yet, but it was clear in every glance. They had already decided he didn't belong. They saw the dust on his jacket, the calluses on his hands, and they thought, broke, not boss. The dealership itself was a fortress of modern comfort, glass walls that let in sunlight, chrome desks, complimentary espresso. But beneath the shine, Darius could feel something else. A quiet coldness. A hierarchy written not on paper, but in how people looked, spoke, and dressed. In that moment, his dusty jacket wasn't just clothing, it was a test. One neither Kelly nor Tyler realized they were about to fail. Darius moved slowly through. The rows of gleaming vehicles, his footsteps soft against the polished tile. Around him, the hum of rehearsed greetings filled the air. "Welcome in, sir. Let me know if you need anything. We've got great deals today." But none of it was for him. Kelly floated past, smiling brightly at a couple in designer coats, offering them bottled water before casually glancing in Darius's direction. Her smile vanished. She turned away. Tyler stood nearby, chatting with a younger man about financing options. When the man asked about the pricing breakdown, Tyler's voice dropped. "Look, this vehicle's got our exclusive engine protection package," he said, tapping the hood. "It's non-negotiable, Adds you $200. But hey, peace of mind, right? The customer nodded slowly, clearly unsure. Darius paused, his brow furrowing slightly. There was no such package in any of the sales sheets he'd approved. After a few minutes of being treated like a ghost, Darius walked up to the front desk where Kelly now stood with arms folded. "Excuse me," he said calmly. "I had a question about your warranties on the 2023 F-150s. Kelly gave him a tight-lipped glance, then exchanged a quick look with Tyler, who was now leaning on the corner of the desk. "We have printed brochures on the table behind you," she said flatly. Darius kept his gaze steady. "I'm asking you." Tyler leaned in, a smirk forming. "Sir, we really don't offer financing options for guys who walk in with, work boots and no appointment," he said, gesturing dismissively to Darius's worn clothes. "We try to keep the floor clear for serious buyers." Darius didn't flinch. He simply tilted his head. "What about customers who own the building?" he asked softly, letting the question hang like a faint breeze before it lands as a storm. They didn't react. Not yet. Just a few feet away, another salesman, Lucas, one of the quieter guys who usually kept his head down, had paused mid-step. His eyes widened. Recognition dawned. He had seen Darius once before, at a corporate event, speaking with the owner of the entire regional chain. Lucas's eyes flicked between Darius, Kelly, and Tyler. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Not yet. Darius turned and walked toward the next row of cars. He wasn't finished observing. Not yet. But the test had begun, and the cracks were already showing. Darius stayed quiet a little longer. He drifted toward the waiting area, eyes scanning every corner of the showroom as he blended into the background. Kelly and Tyler were back at it, again swooping in with big smiles when a couple in business attire stepped inside, offering brochures and fresh coffee like clockwork. But when an older man in a utility jumpsuit walked in moments later, they didn't move an inch. The man wandered toward a silver SUV, clearly interested, but no one greeted him. He lingered awkwardly, trying to flag someone down. Tyler walked past him without a word, then muttered under his breath to Kelly, just loud enough for Darius to catch, "Probably here to ask for directions, not buy a truck." They both laughed, softly but with the unmistakable smugness of people who believed they had the right to judge. Then came another sting. Darius listened as Kelly pitched an advanced climate control add-on to a customer already filling out paperwork, a charge he knew didn't exist. They were fabricating fees, scamming people who didn't know any better. He'd built this dealership on integrity, and now that very foundation was being cracked by the kind of people he'd sworn never to hire. He turned back, walked toward them slowly, his boots clicking against the tile. "Is this how you treat every customer?" he asked evenly, voice calm but cutting. "Or just the ones who look like me?" Tyler blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me," he said, trying to laugh it off. Kelly folded her arms, eyes narrowing. "Look, sir," she said defensively, "we treat everyone based on the level of interest and seriousness they show." Darius didn't respond. Not immediately. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. With a single tap, the flat-screen television mounted above the main desk flickered to life. Video began to play, footage from the dealership's security feed, overlaid with a timestamp. The clip showed Tyler speaking to the earlier customer about the fake engine protection fee, followed by the moment he tossed a brochure at the man and rolled his eyes. Then came Kelly, smirking while mocking a woman's accent as she walked out the door. The final shot was of both of them standing in front of Darius, arms crossed, saying nothing while other customers were greeted with open arms. The room fell silent. Customers looked up from their seats. The staff froze in place. Darius let the footage run a few seconds longer, then quietly tapped the screen off. "I've been recording all morning," he said, "and not just from the cameras, from the moment I walked in." Kelly's mouth fell open slightly. Tyler's face paled, sweat beating at his temple. Who are you?" Darius turned without answering and walked through the showroom toward the manager's office. He opened the door without knocking, emerged seconds later with a thick folder, and returned to the floor. With quiet precision, he flipped the folder open on the front desk. Purchase contracts, ownership certificates, lease agreements, all signed with the same name, Darius Cole. "I'm the CEO," he said finally. "I bought this dealership 5 years ago, and I came here today because I wanted to see the truth for myself." He looked around the room, at the staff, the customers, the stunned silence. "Now I have." Darius let the silence breathe, letting the weight of the moment settle into the gleaming tile floors and polished chrome trim of the showroom. Tyler stood frozen, his smirk now a shaky grimace. Kelly took a nervous step back, her voice barely above a whisper. We didn't know who you were." Her tone was soft now, respectful in the way that only shows up when status enters the room. But Darius didn't flinch. He didn't blink. "And that's exactly the problem," he said, calm and clear. "You only give respect when you think it matters." He reached back into the folder, pulling out a series of printed reports. "These," he said, holding them up, "are internal complaints from customers who walked into this dealership and left feeling disrespected, scammed, or invisible. I read every single one. The engine protection scam, it's mentioned here. Fake climate packages, that too. Charges you invented, fees you couldn't explain, and attitudes that made people feel small." His tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. Truth doesn't have to shout to be heard. "I've been watching this location for weeks," he continued. "Not because I had nothing better to do, but because culture comes from the floor, not the corner office. I started as a mechanic. I've worn oil on my hands and steel in my boots, and when I started this chain, I told myself I'd build something different. A business where every customer, whether they show up in a suit or coveralls, gets the same handshake." Tyler had gone pale, his shoulders sagging beneath the weight of exposure. "Mr. Cole, he started. Darius held up a hand. "No rehearsed apologies. Not today." Kelly stepped forward, eyes wide with desperation. "We were just trying to hit numbers. You know how the system works." Darius shook his head. "The system didn't tell you to lie. You did that on your own." And then Darius turned toward the only employee in the room who hadn't flinched. Lucas, the quiet young salesman who had recognized him earlier and chose to keep watching. Their eyes met, and this time, Darius offered a small, approving nod. "You knew who I was," he said, "but you didn't say anything. You watched, you stayed professional, and you treated every person who walked through that door like they mattered." Lucas swallowed hard, surprised by the sudden spotlight. "I just did my job," he said softly. "No," Darius replied. "You did it with integrity, and that's rare." He reached into the folder again and handed Lucas a sealed envelope. "That's a promotion letter. Starting next week, you're E. Moving into a senior role. training new hires on what this place should actually stand for. The room remained silent. No one applauded, but everyone understood something had shifted. Respect wasn't about who walked in with the cleanest shoes. It was about who walked out with their values intact, absolutely. Here's the extended and enhanced version of the resolution and moral reflection section. Approximately 1,000 words. With deeper emotional weight, legacy building, symbolism, and powerful narrative continuity, all in rich paragraph form. The dealership had never been quieter than the moment Kelly and Tyler were escorted off the showroom floor. There were no dramatic exits, no slammed doors, just the echo of truth catching up to arrogance in real time. Darius didn't raise his voice, didn't humiliate them. He simply made it clear, actions have consequences. You don't just represent this brand, he had told them. You represent every person who's ever walked in here hoping for a fair chance, and today you failed them. As they disappeared through the glass doors, a hush remained, not of fear, but of realization. The other employees stood still, some with lowered eyes, some visibly shaken, and others deeply contemplative. Darius turned to the remaining staff, walking to the center of the showroom with the same slow, steady steps that had carried him in earlier that morning. Dust on his jacket, boots unshined, heart wide open. This place doesn't sell cars, he said, his voice low but carrying to every corner of the space. It builds trust. It builds community. It builds opportunity. And when you break that trust with lies, prejudice, or ego, it doesn't just cost a sale. It costs our soul. He paused, letting the silence sit before continuing. I started my life under a car, not behind a desk. I've been the guy no one would look in the eye, and I promised myself, if I ever had the chance to lead, I'd build something different. Something real. In the days that followed, Darius didn't just implement new rules. He initiated a culture reset. Every staff member, no matter their title or time served, underwent intensive ethics, equity, and customer-first training. Trainers were brought in. Meetings were no longer just about sales goals. They were about stories, listening, accountability. Even the architecture changed. The corner office, once enclosed in glass, was turned into an open mentoring space. A new code of values was posted on every wall. Integrity is our loudest feature. Respect is our only dress code. Lucas, the quiet but sharp-eyed salesman who had recognized Darius but chose observation over performance, was promoted again, this time to head of mentorship and development. Darius pulled him aside after a meeting, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said, "You didn't speak just to be seen. You waited to understand. And that's the kind of leader I trust." But for Darius, leadership had never been confined to a building. A week after the confrontation, he returned to where it all began, the old mechanic shop tucked between a diner and a shuttered laundromat on the other side of town. It was the place where he first held a wrench, where he learned that excellence wasn't about polish, it was about persistence. That shop had changed his life, not by giving him wealth, but by giving him worth. The smell of motor oil and rusted bolts greeted him like an old friend. Darius walked through the open bay doors carrying 3 large toolboxes and a donation envelope. The current shop owner, an older man with worn hands and kind eyes, looked up in surprise. "Darius," he asked, "is that really you?" "In the flesh," Darius smiled, setting the boxes down. "I brought some new gear and a scholarship fund. For any kid willing to show up early, get dirty, and learn what work really means." The man choked back emotion, clapping a hand on Darius's back. "They won't just learn cars," he said. "They'll learn what a future looks like." Darius didn't need headlines. He didn't want them. He just wanted the next generation to know that greatness doesn't always wear a tie. Later that week, he returned to the dealership, not in a fresh suit or tailored overcoat, but in the same dusty denim jacket and the same boots they'd once scoffed at. This time, no one looked away. No one laughed. The receptionist greeted him by name. Lucas nodded with quiet respect. One of the new hires even stood and shook his hand, saying, "I've heard what you did, sir. Thank you for holding the line." Darius walked the floor, watching as a young family was shown around by an eager salesman who didn't check their shoes or their tone, just asked what they needed. Another customer, an older woman, was offered coffee and a seat before she'd even said a word. The place didn't feel flashy anymore. It felt honest, and that was worth everything. Before leaving, Darius paused at the far end of the showroom. The sun poured through the glass walls, bouncing off the polished cars, but he wasn't looking at the vehicles. He was watching people, real people, being treated with dignity, the very thing that had once been denied to him in that same space. He turned toward the exit, passing a young boy standing outside with his father, gazing at the cars in awe. The boy's father smiled and said, "He wants to be like you one day." Darius knelt slightly, looked the boy in the eye, and said, "Then tell him he already is. All he needs is heart." Because at the end of the day, Darius Cole didn't just own a dealership. He owned a legacy, and it wasn't built with wealth. It was built with work, with character, with quiet storms that change the weather. Because the loudest person in the room isn't always in charge. Sometimes it's the one you ignored, who was holding your future the whole time. The afternoon. Sun dipped low as Darius walked past the edge of the car lot, the gravel crunching beneath his boots, keys in hand. Beside him, the young apprentice from the shop, wide-eyed and curious, hurried to keep up, asking questions about engines, leadership, and how someone goes from fixing broken things to building something unbreakable. Darius didn't rush. He answered each one with the same patience that had carried him through decades of being underestimated. Around them, the lot shimmered with polished vehicles, but the real story was the one that couldn't be sold or priced, the one walking beside him, learning how to carry purpose. They saw grease on his shirt and missed the gold in his name. Have you ever been misjudged before anyone even asked your story? If this story moved you, share it with someone who knows their worth, someone who's been overlooked but never overpowered. And follow for more real stories where truth walks in quietly and leaves echoing in every corner it touched.